The gala is loud, and I am reading the prince's left hand. That's the whole of my work in this moment, not the 100 guests, not the doors, not the wine-bright noise of it, the music and the laughter and the chandelier glare off 400 jewels. My work is one hand. The Crown Prince Havard's left hand, resting on the edge of the long table where he sits among the great of 3 kingdoms, and the small things it does that no one else in this hall would ever read, because no one else has stood at this man's shoulder for 9 years learning the language his hand speaks when his mouth can't. We built it ourselves, the language. That's a thing you should understand before any of the rest. Over 9 years, a prince and his close protection lead build a private speech of small gestures, because there are 1,000 moments when a royal cannot say the thing aloud, cannot lean to his guard in front of an ambassador and murmur, "I'm uneasy, get me out," and so the hand says it instead. 2 fingers flat on the table, "I'm fine, stand easy." A turned wine cup, "I want to leave within the hour, make it graceful." A thumb hooked under the table's lip, hidden, "Something's wrong, stay close." We made these. Refined them across 9 years and 1,000 events, until reading his hand was as natural to me as reading my own pulse, until I could stand 30 feet away at a gala like this one and know the weather inside him from the angle of 2 fingers. My name is Siravain, lead of the prince's close protection, kingdom of Aldermere, 9 years at his shoulder, and tonight at the gala in the Hall of Mirrors with 3 kingdoms watching, his hand made a signal I had seen exactly once before, in a drill, never in the world, the signal we'd built for the worst case and prayed we'd never use. And I am already moving before I have finished thinking it, because that is what 9 years builds, a body that moves before the thought lands. I should tell you, before the hand moves, that I'd worked 1,000 nights like this one and nothing had ever happened. That's the thing about close protection, it's 10,000 hours of nothing, of standing and watching and reading a hand that only ever says, "I'm fine, stand easy," 10,000 hours of the worst case never coming, until your whole body half stops believing the worst case is real, even as your training insists it is. You drill the extraction 100 times knowing you'll never use it. You build the worst case signal praying it stays a drill. 9 years I'd read this man's hand and it had never once made the bad sign, not in the world, only in practice, and some part of me, the tired animal part, the part that had stood 1,000 safe galas, had stopped truly believing the bad sign would ever come. That's the danger in the work nobody warns you about, not the threat. The slow forgetting that the threat is real, worn into you by years of safety. And the threat, when it finally comes to a body that's half forgotten to expect it, and the only thing that saves you is whether the training underneath the forgetting is deep enough to fire anyway. Mine was. Barely. 9 years of drilling a sign I never thought I'd see meant that, when I finally saw it, the trained part moved even though the tired animal part had stopped believing. That's what the drilling is for. Not for the 1,000 nights it's wasted. For the one night the tired animal has stopped believing, and the trained body has to move anyway, alone, against its own forgetting. Let me freeze it. Let me hold the hall still a moment and show you what I saw, because everything turns on the reading of it, and you should see it the way I saw it. The signal for extraction, the "get me out now, this is real, do not wait for confirmation" signal, was a thing we'd built deliberately strange, deliberately unmistakable, so it could never be confused with an ordinary gesture. The right hand flat, then closed slow into a fist, then the index finger extended and laid along the table pointing toward. And this was the part. This was always the part pointing toward the threat. We'd built the pointing in on purpose. A guard who knows you need out is good. A guard who knows which direction the danger is in is better. So the signal didn't just say "get me out." It said "get me out, and the danger is that way," and the finger would point subtly, low, along the table's edge, toward the corner of the room the prince wanted me to know to fear. I saw the hand go flat. I saw it close to the fist. My body was already turning before the finger extended, already finding my 2 nearest team, already running the route to the east service door in my head, the route we drilled, 9 years of drilling one route for one moment, and this was the moment. And the finger extended and pointed. And it didn't point at the corner. It didn't point at the doors or the windows or any place an outside threat would come from. The prince's finger, laid along the table's edge in the signal we'd built for 9 years, pointed at my own second in command. At Doran. At the man standing 12 feet from the prince, inside the protection detail, one of mine, one of us, the man I'd have trusted with the prince's life and my own and had, 100 times. The finger pointed at Doran and held there, and I felt the floor of 9 years drop out from under me, because the signal was working exactly as we'd built it. The prince was telling me precisely what he'd trained me to hear: get me out. The danger is that way, and that way was inside my own team. I have to tell you what that does to a body in the half-second, because the half-second is where this whole night lived and died. 9 years of training points you one direction. When the extraction signal comes, you trust your team and you move fast as one. The team is your hands and your speed and your safety. You flow toward the door as a single organism, and the team is the organism. Everything in me was built to, in this exact moment, turn to Doran, my second, my right hand, and say the word and trust him to take half the load, to clear the route, to be what he'd been 100 times, the other half of getting the prince out alive. The body wanted to turn to Doran the way a hand wants to grip. He was the reflex. He was the trusted reflex of 9 years. And the prince's finger was pointing at the reflex and calling it the threat. Do you understand what that asks of a person in a half-second, in a loud, bright hall with 3 kingdoms watching and a clock already running? It asks you to betray your own nervous system, to take the thing your body most wants to do, turn to your second, trust your team, move as one, and do the opposite, alone, instantly, on nothing but a finger laid along a table by a man who has never once in 9 years used that signal wrong. 9 years of Doran is safe against one finger saying Doran is the danger. And I had a half-second to choose which 9 years to believe, the 9 years of trusting Doran, or the 9 years of trusting the prince's hand. Because they were the same 9 years, they'd been built side by side, and now they pointed opposite ways and I could only obey one. I obeyed the hand. I want that on the record first before anything goes wrong, before you learn what it cost. In the half-second, I obeyed the prince's hand over my own reflex. I believed the finger over the team, and everything that happened after, the good and the terrible both, happened because in 1 half-second I trusted the language we'd built over the instincts the job had drilled. If I trusted the team instead, the prince would be dead. I know that now. I didn't know it then. In the half-second, I only knew the hand had never lied, and I moved on the hand against everything, alone. So now picture the hall the instant after, with me holding a truth no one else has. The extraction is live, and my own second is the threat, and I cannot say either thing aloud. I cannot key my radio and say extract, because the radio is the team's. Doran's on the team channel. And if Doran is the threat, then the team channel is compromised, and the word extract spoken into it tells the threat the prince knows. I cannot turn to my nearest guards and direct them, because I don't know yet how deep it goes. Is it only Doran, or is it Doran and others? Is the whole detail turned or just one man? And I have no way to know in the half-second and no way to find out without revealing that I know. I am, suddenly, alone in a hall of 400 people with a prince to extract, and a team I can no longer trust, and a clock running, and not one safe voice to use, not one trusted hand to reach for. Everything I'd relied on for 9 years, the team, the channel, the drilled flow of the extraction, all of it just became the thing I have to get the prince away from, not toward. And the prince is watching me. That's the thread I'm holding onto in the half-second, the one true thing left. The prince is watching my face to see if I read it, if I understood, if his 9 years of trusting me to read his hand are about to pay off or fail him at the one moment it's ever mattered. I look at him, one look, the length of a heartbeat across 30 feet of bright loud hall, and I let my own face do the smallest thing. A thing only he would read, the answering signal, the one that says, "Understood. I have it. Stay with me." And I see something go out of his shoulders, the smallest easing, the relief of a man who has just learned that the bet he placed 9 years ago on one guard reading one hand has, at the worst possible moment, come good. He told me the truth with his finger. I told him with my face that I'd heard it. And now the two of us alone, against my own team, in a hall full of the great of 3 kingdoms, have to get him out. And the clock is running. And the only person in the world I can trust is 30 feet away and cannot move on his own. And the only person who can move freely is me, alone, with a radio I can't use and a team I can't trust, and a half-second already spent. The half-second is over. Now it's just the doing. Let me tell you how the doing went. I have to back up. I know I'm in the middle of a night with a clock running, and I'll get back to the doing, the north stair and the gallery and what it cost. But you can't feel the half-second, can't feel what it took to obey that finger against my own reflex, unless you understand the 9 years behind it, the language, the prince, the man at my shoulder I never read. So let me back up fast and lay the 9 years down, and then I'll take you up the stair. The clock can wait in the telling. It didn't wait that night. But in the telling I'm allowed to stop it, and I need to, because the 9 years are the whole reason the half-second broke my heart. The language, how 9 years build a speech of hands, because you can't feel the betrayal of the reflex without it. I told you the prince and I built a language. I want to give you how, because the building is the bond, and the bond is what made the half-second the hardest thing I've ever done, and what made its cost the heaviest. It started small, the way these things do in the first year, when Havard was barely more than a boy newly given his own household, and I was barely more than a girl newly given the leading of his guard, both of us too young for what we'd been handed, both of us figuring it out in public with 3 kingdoms watching for us to fail. And we learned fast that a prince and his guard need to talk without talking, because a royal's whole life is performed, every word overheard, every face read, and there are 100 moments a day when he needs to tell me something he can't say aloud. This man frightens me. That woman is fishing for state secrets. I'm about to faint from the heat and 3 hours of standing, and you must get me a chair without anyone seeing why. So we made signs. The first was the simplest, the "I'm fine," 2 fingers flat, because in the early days I was forever leaning in to ask was he well, and he was forever having to perform wellness for the room while answering me. And we worked out that 2 fingers flat on any surface meant stand easy. I've got this. And it freed us both. And it grew from there, year on year, a private vocabulary built one necessity at a time, until we had 100 signs, 200, a whole silent speech that no one else in any court could read, that was ours, that made us, I'll say the true word, that made us close, in the particular way you're close to the one person who shares a language with you that no one else speaks. 9 years of that. 9 years of being the only 2 people in the world fluent in a tongue we'd invented, and you cannot share a private language with someone for 9 years and not love them. Not the way the songs mean. Something quieter and deeper than the songs. The love of 2 people who can speak in a room full of people and not be heard, who can stand 30 feet apart at a gala and have an entire conversation in the angle of a hand. The prince was my charge and my work, and in the way of that private tongue, the closest person in my life, closer than family, because family doesn't share a secret language built in the pressure of 9 years of keeping a man alive. So understand what the half-second asked. The extraction signal pointed at Doran, but the signal itself was made of the language, the beautiful private 9 years language, and obeying it meant betraying my own reflex, yes, but it also meant that the language, our language, the closest thing in my life, had just been used to tell me the most terrible thing it had ever said. 9 years we'd built that tongue for tenderness and safety, for chairs and warnings and the small mercies of 2 people keeping each other sane in the glare. And now it opened its mouth and said your second is the traitor, and I had to hear it in the language of all that closeness, which made it worse, made it land in the deepest trusted part of me, because it came in the voice I trusted most in the world. The prince didn't just tell me Doran was turned. He told me in our language, the one we'd built with love, and so the betrayal arrived wearing the voice of the one bond I'd never once doubted, and I had to act on it instantly, and I did, and it was like being told by your own heart that your hand is poison. That's what 9 years of language did. It made me able to read the warning. It also made the warning unbearable, because it came from inside the closest thing I had. The prince himself, who he was, so the trust runs both ways and you feel what was at stake. I should give you Havard properly, not just as a hand to read but as a man, because the trust ran both ways and you have to feel what I was guarding. He was not an easy prince, and I'm glad of it. Easy princes are usually shallow ones. He was watchful like me, which is partly why we built the language so well. 2 watchers recognize each other. He carried the weight of the crown coming the way thoughtful people carry a thing they didn't ask for and can't put down, with a kind of tired grace. And he was kind in the small, unwitnessed ways that are the only kindness that counts. Kind to the servants, kind to the green guards, kind to me in the small moments when no one was watching and there was nothing to perform. Once, years in, on a long cold night journey, he'd taken off his own cloak and put it over a sleeping young guard in the carriage. A nobody, a boy, and gone cold himself the rest of the way rather than wake him, and thought no one saw, and I saw, because seeing is my work, and I never forgot it. That was the man, a prince who'd freeze rather than wake a tired boy. That's who placed his life in my reading of his hand, and that's who I placed my own trust in fully, the kind of trust that let me, in the half-second, throw out my own nervous system on the strength of his finger. Because 9 years of watching him had taught me he did not make mistakes with the language, did not cry wolf, did not use a serious sign for a small thing. If his hand said extraction, there was an extraction, full stop. The man was incapable of using that sign lightly. So when it pointed at Doran, I didn't doubt the reading, even though the reading broke my heart, because the man making the sign had 9 years of never once misusing it, and a trust like that, earned across 9 years, is the only thing strong enough to override a trained reflex. I trusted the prince more than I trusted my own hands. That's what we'd built. That's what saved him. And that's the thing I'd give anything to have also aimed, even once, at the man on my other side. Doran, before the signs I should have read and didn't, looking back. I've gone back over the 9 years 1,000 times looking for the moment I should have seen Doran turning, and the terrible thing is there's no single moment. There's just a slow accumulation of small signs I read as nothing because I wasn't watching him, I was watching the prince. But they were there. Let me set them down, the signs I missed, because a guard who teaches others should teach them this above all. Watch the man beside you, not only the man in front. Doran came to the detail the same year I did. We were near equals at the start, 2 skilled young guards, and it could as easily have been him made lead as me. That's a thing I've had to face, that the difference between us at the beginning was thin. A matter of a few choices, a bit of luck, the prince's preference. And the prince preferred me. Chose me to lead, chose me over time to be the one he built the language with, and Doran became the second, the right hand, the always just outside. And he took it well at first, or seemed to. The way a proud man takes a disappointment he means to rise above. But the years are long, and second is a long time to be when you started equal. And I watched, no, that's the lie, I didn't watch, that's the whole point. I didn't watch the slow work the years did on him. The way always second curdles when it goes on long enough. The way watching another person be led into an intimacy you're locked out of does a particular damage. The signs, looking back. The way he'd go quiet when the prince and I used the language in front of him, a quiet I read as professionalism and was actually exclusion, the hollow ache of standing beside a conversation you can't hear. The way in the later years his loyalty got formal, still perfect, still flawless in execution, but formal, the warmth gone out of it, The difference between a man who serves because he loves and a man who serves because it's his function. And I noted the change and filed it under getting older, getting tired, when it was getting hollow, getting ready. The small bitternesses he'd let slip and laugh off, about advancement, about being passed over, about the prince's favorites. I laughed them off with him, because they seemed like the ordinary grumbles of any career, and they were the sound of a door closing in a man, the almost finally giving up on ever becoming the through. 9 years of signs. I read the prince's hand across a loud hall and missed 9 years of a man going hollow at my own shoulder. The reading and the missing were the same skill pointed 2 directions, and I only ever pointed it one way, and the way I didn't point it is the way the dark came in. The gala in full, the night before the signal, so you stand in it. Let me set the gala properly before the signal, because I've rushed you to the hand and you should stand in the room first, feel its falseness, the way I felt it without knowing why. The Hall of Mirrors, they called it, the great reception hall, walls of tall silvered glass so that the 400 guests became 4,000, the chandeliers multiplied into a galaxy, the whole bright lying spectacle of a state gala where 3 kingdoms pretended to friendship over wine. The smells, hothouse flowers forced for the season, too sweet, cloying, perfume and pomade and the sweat under them, the rich heavy smell of a feast laid for people too important to seem hungry. The sound, the orchestra, and over it the particular roar of 400 powerful people performing ease at each other, the laughter that's a weapon, the small talk that's reconnaissance. I'd worked 100 galas. I knew the falseness of them in my bones, the way everyone in such a room is watching everyone else, the way nothing said is the thing meant, the way a state gala is a battlefield where the weapons are smiles. And I'll tell you a true thing, I felt wrong that night before the hand ever moved. Not anything I could name, nothing I could act on, just the old animal unease, the sense a watcher gets when the room's weather is off. I put it down to the usual gala dread, the heightened watchfulness any big event brings. I was wrong to put it down. The unease was real. My body had felt something my mind couldn't name, the way it does, and the something was Doran, was the turned man moving through the room toward his moment, giving off whatever it is a man about to commit a terrible thing gives off, the subtle wrongness that the animal in us reads before the mind can. I felt it and dismissed it. The prince felt it too, I think, or saw something definite I'd only sensed, saw whatever told him Doran was the threat, some confirmation I never got the detail of, and where I dismissed my unease, the prince acted on his certainty and made the sign. He was braver than me that night in that one way. He trusted the wrong feeling enough to act. I'd felt it too and talked myself out of it. If I'd trusted my own unease the way he trusted his, maybe, but no. There's no end to that maybe. I felt the room was wrong and did nothing, and the prince felt it and signed, and his courage covered my failure, the way, that whole night, his reading and trusting kept covering the places I'd gone blind. Pell, the green boy, given his life before I tell you his death. I have to give you Pell alive before the gallery, because I rushed his death, and a boy who dies for a prince deserves more than a fast line, deserves to be a person first. He was 19, new to the detail that spring, one of the green ones I half noticed and didn't bother to know, the way you don't bother to know the green ones because half of them wash out, and it's easier not to learn a name you'll lose. But I'd noticed a few things about Pell, in the offhand way, that came back to me hard after. He was earnest in a way the older guards had learned to hide, still visibly proud to wear the colors, still standing his posts with a straightness that the veterans had let soften, a boy who hadn't yet learned that the job was mostly boredom and had a little to do. He'd asked me a question once early that I'd brushed off, asked how you knew, in the moment, what to do, when the moment came, since you couldn't drill the real moment. I'd given him some line about training, about the body knowing, and moved on, hadn't really answered him, hadn't thought he was worth the full answer. And the terrible thing is he answered his own question, In the end, in a gallery with his body the way I'd half told him. When the moment came, he didn't think, he just put himself between, the body knowing, exactly as I'd brushed off promised him it would. He'd wanted to know if he'd be brave when it counted. He was. He never got to know that he was not really. It was over too fast for him to know he'd done the bravest thing a guard can do. He died still, maybe, half wondering if he'd measure up, and he'd already measured up past all of us, past me, past Doran's 9 years, a 19-year-old who put his body where it counted 90 seconds after his world turned upside down. I grabbed him in the half-second, because he was green enough to be clean. I didn't grab him for his courage. I didn't know his courage. I grabbed him for his uselessness to a conspiracy, the cold arithmetic of who couldn't be turned. And the boy I grabbed for being too new to be worth corrupting turned out to be the bravest of all of us. There's a lesson in that I still can't fully hold, that the one I chose for the meanest reason, his very greenness, gave the most, gave everything. I'll carry Pell the way the guard in another story carries a dead driver, the way we all carry the ones who paid for our living, with his life set down here in words, so he's more than the fast line in the record, more than one guard lost in the extraction. His name was Pell. He was 19. He wanted to know if he'd be brave. He was the bravest of us. Write it down. That's the 9 years. The language, the prince, the hollow man I never saw, the false bright Gala, the green boy alive. Now the clock starts again. Now I take you up the stair. Back to the half-second's long shadow, back to the doing where I left us, alone in a bright hall with a prince to save and a team turned and not one safe voice to use. First rule when the channel's gone, get a clean voice. I had none. So I made one with my body, the way the prince and I made language with ours. I couldn't use the radio. But I had 2 guards on the detail who were newer, greener, Pell and a young one named Cole, too new to have been turned. I judged in the half-second's brutal arithmetic. Because you don't turn the green ones haven't got anything worth buying yet. You turn the trusted ones, the Dorans, the ones with access and bitterness and 9 years of resentment you never saw. So Pell and Cole were probably clean. Probably. I had to bet the prince's life on probably, which is the whole of this work, betting lives on probably and living with the bets. I moved toward Pell, not hurrying, a lead checking her post the way a lead does 100 times a night, nothing in it. And as I passed him, I did the thing, close, low, my hand finding his arm and into his ear 3 words not on any channel, just ear to ear. On me, not Doran. That's all. On me, not Doran. And I watched the boy's face do the thing a young guard's face does when his whole world tilts, the flash of confusion, the wanting to ask, and then, God bless the training that does at least this much, the swallowing of the question and the small nod, because a green guard's one virtue is that he still does what the lead says without needing to understand, and that virtue was, in that moment, worth more than all of Doran's 9 years of skill. On me, not Doran. The boy nodded. I had one clean voice, one. Here's the thing about extracting a prince when your own second is the threat. The threat knows the plan. Doran had drilled the same extraction I had 100 times. He knew the route, east service door, the drilled route, the only route. He knew where I'd take the prince, knew it as well as I did, which meant the one route I'd trained for 9 years was the one route I absolutely could not use, because Doran would have it covered, would be ahead of me on it or have men on it or be ready for it, because it was his route too. 9 years of drilling one route, and the moment it mattered the route was poison, was the trap, was exactly where the threat expected me to go because he'd learned to expect it standing right beside me. So I had to improvise a route in real time alone that my own second wouldn't predict, which meant a route I myself had never drilled, never walked, a route I'd have to invent on the floor of a gala with a prince in tow and a clock running, which is the thing they tell you never to do, never improvise a royal's extraction route. You use the drilled one. The drilled one is safe precisely because it's known. Except the drilled one was known to the wrong man. Everything that made me good at this job, the drilled route, the trusted team, the clean channel, the flow, Every single asset had been turned into a liability by one finger pointing the wrong way, and I had to do the entire job inside out, using none of my tools, trusting none of my people, improvising the one thing you never improvise, alone, in the half-seconds long shadow. I am telling you this slowly, but it happened fast. It all happened in the space of a few minutes on a gala floor while the music played, and 400 people drank and laughed, and never knew that their crown prince was being walked out through a betrayal by a woman holding her whole world inside out in her two hands. I went to the prince. A lead goes to her principal. It's the most natural thing in the hall. No one reads anything into the lead bending to murmur to the prince. I bent, and under the cover of some nothing pleasantry, mouth barely moving, I gave him the only briefing I could. North stare, not east. With me. Now. North stare, not east, telling him in 3 words that I'd thrown out 9 years of drilling, that we were going off-plan, off-route, into the unrehearsed dark, and that he had to trust me to invent our survival as we went. And the prince, this is why I'd have died for him. This is the man he was. The prince didn't flicker, didn't ask, didn't hesitate, didn't do the thing a frightened principal does, which is freeze or argue or want the familiar plan. He told me the truth with his finger, and now he gave me the other half, the trust, the letting himself be led into the unrehearsed dark on nothing but my word, because the language we'd built ran both ways. I trusted his hand, he trusted my face, and now we'd both bet everything on the other reading true, and we rose from the table together, the prince and his lead, an ordinary leaving, nothing in it. And we walked not toward the east service door that 9 years had drilled, but toward the north stair that neither of us had ever walked as an extraction route, into the part of the night I'd have to invent. Behind us, I felt it more than saw it, the way you feel a held gaze on your back. Behind us, Doran moved. I'd broken the pattern. The lead was taking the prince the wrong way, off the drilled route, and Doran was good. Doran was 9 years good. And a break in the pattern is exactly the thing a good guard reads, the way I'd read the prince's hand. He knew I'd gone off-plan, which meant he knew I knew. The moment I turned toward the north stair instead of the east door, I told Doran, as surely as if I'd said it aloud, that his betrayal was seen. Because there was no other reason on earth for the lead to abandon the drilled route, and Doran would read that instantly, and now it was a race, the thing I'd hoped to avoid. The open race, because the threat knew the prince knew, and a threat that knows it's discovered stops being patient and starts being fast. The north stair, cold after the hall's heat, stone, dim, a servant's way, and the gala noise dropping away behind us as the door swung to. And suddenly it was just the 3 of us in the stairwell. The prince, me, and young Pell, who'd peeled off the floor and fallen in behind us the way I told him on me, not Doran. The one clean voice made flesh, a green boy with a drawn nerve and no idea what was happening except that his lead had said come and not Doran, and had come. And here is where I had to decide how much to tell the boy fast, because I couldn't fight a betrayal with a guard who didn't know there was one. So in the stairwell, moving 3 words at a time between breaths, I told him, Doran's turned. Don't trust the channel, Prince only goal. And I watched the boy take the worst news of his young career, that the second in command, the man who trained him, was the threat, take it on the stairs at a run with no time to feel it, and do the only thing that mattered, which was keep moving and keep his eyes up and put himself, without being told, a half-step behind the prince on the dangerous side, the boy's body finding the right place even while his mind was still reeling, because somewhere under the green he had the thing you can't train. The thing that makes a guard, the instinct to put himself between. I'd bet right on Pell. In the half-seconds brutal arithmetic, I'd grabbed the green boy over the skilled man, and the green boy was, right now, on a cold stair, becoming exactly the guard I needed. And Doran, all his 9 years of skill, was somewhere behind us being the threat. Skill is bought. The thing that puts a boy's body between a prince and the dark can't be. I'd take Pell's raw instinct over Doran's bought skill, that night and every night after. We climbed. I didn't know yet where the north stair would take us that the east door wouldn't. Didn't have a plan passed away from the drilled route. Was inventing it tread by tread. And the clock was running. And somewhere below and behind a turned man who knew he was discovered was moving fast through a palace he knew as well as I did. Hunting the prince I was carrying up a stair into a dark I hadn't rehearsed. With one green boy and a private language, and 9 years, suddenly worth nothing and everything at once. It went wrong at the top of the stair, the way these things go wrong, fast and ugly and not how you drilled. Doran hadn't followed us up the stair. That's what I'd misjudged in the speed of it. I'd thought the threat would chase, and a chasing threat you can hear coming, can manage, can stay ahead of. Doran didn't chase. Doran was better than that. He knew the palace as well as I did, and he knew that the north stair came out, 3 floors up, into a gallery with only 2 ways off it. And he knew I didn't know that because I'd never drilled the north stair and he'd walked it. I learned later, walked it many times in the weeks before, because he'd been planning his own thing and the north stair was part of it, which is the bitter joke at the heart of the whole night. The unrehearsed route I improvised to escape the traitor was a route the traitor had rehearsed. I ran from his plan straight into his plan. There's no drilling against a man who's drilled against you for weeks while standing at your shoulder. He was waiting in the gallery. Not alone, he had 1 man with him, another of the detail, so it was 2 turned, not 1, and I'd been right to trust no one and wrong about how deep it ran, and there was no time to feel the size of that, the 2 familiar faces in the dim gallery, men I'd worked beside for years, waiting to kill the prince I was bringing to them up a stair they'd known I'd be forced to use. The drilled route was poison, and the improvised route was poison because the improvised route was secretly his drilled route. Every door was his. That's what a deep enough betrayal is. It's the discovery that every door you know is a door the enemy knew first. I'm not going to make the fight in the gallery into something it wasn't. The songs make these things clean, and they are not clean. It was short, and it was ugly, and it was 3 of us who knew each other's training against well. Let me just tell you what it cost, because the cost is the thing. The cost is always the thing. Pell died in the gallery, the green boy, the one clean voice. He did the thing his body had been finding all night, the thing under the green that can't be trained. When Doran's man moved on the prince, Pell put himself between, exactly between, no hesitation. A boy of not yet 20 who'd known about the betrayal for 90 seconds put his whole body in the path of the thing coming for the prince. And it was him it took instead of the prince. And that is the only reason the prince is alive. That a green boy I'd grabbed on instinct in a half-second spent his whole life in a gallery 90 seconds after learning the world was upside down. I'd bet on Pell. I'd bet right. And the rightness of the bet is the worst thing I carry, because betting right meant a boy died doing the thing I'd chosen him for, and I chose him in the half-second knowing, not knowing, but knowing, the way you know that grabbing the green boy over the skilled traitor might mean the green boy paid. He paid. He bought the prince's life with his own, and he was 19, and I picked him for it in half a second, and he never even knew the whole of what was happening, only that his lead said come, and he came, and he died, and the prince lived. I dealt with Doran, I'll not detail it. We knew each other's training, 9 years of it, and in the end the difference between us was not skill, because we were matched. The difference was that I had a prince behind me that I would die before I'd let past, and Doran had only his reasons, and reasons in the end in a gallery are lighter than a body that will not move from in front of the thing it guards. He had skill and reasons. I had the prince at my back and nothing left to lose and a dead boy's weight already on me. I won. I'm still not entirely sure how. The body did it, the way the body does the worst things while the mind stood back and watched. Doran is dead. His man fled and was taken later. The prince lived. We got him out in the end, the prince and I, down a different stair, into the night, into the cars. The emergency extraction that the records will say was triggered by a hidden signal at the Gala, which it was, and which the records will make sound clean and quick and professional, which it was not, which cost a 19-year-old boy his entire life, and cost me something I've never gotten back. Now the truth of Doran, because you'll want it, and because it's the thing that's haunted me more than the gallery. Doran wasn't evil. I've had years to want him to have been evil because evil is easy, evil you can hate clean. He wasn't. He was a man with 9 years of standing at a prince's shoulder, watching other men be rewarded and raised while he stayed second, always second, the lead's right hand and never the lead, never the prince's true confidant the way I was, never inside the language the prince and I had built, and that exclusion had rotted in him, year on year, the way being almost trusted rots a man worse than being distrusted outright, because the almost is a door held open that never lets you through. And someone had found that rot. The same way the snakes always find the rot, a faction, foreign coin, the usual, it doesn't matter. The mechanism is always the same. Find the trusted man with the almost in him, the bitterness of the second chair, and offer him the thing the almost has been aching for, and he'll open the door he spent 9 years standing beside. Doran opened the door, not because he was evil, because he was almost trusted for 9 years and the almost finally broke him, and someone was there to catch the pieces and point them at the prince. And here's the part that's mine to carry, I never saw it. 9 years at his side and I never saw the rot, never saw the almost eating him, never once thought to bring him further inside, to make him part of the language, to close the door of the almost by letting him through it. I was so busy building my private speech with the prince that I never noticed the man on my other side going hollow from being left outside it. The betrayal was Doran's, but the not seeing was mine. I'd built a language so close and so private with the prince that it had walls, and Doran had spent 9 years on the wrong side of those walls, and I never once thought what that does to a man, to stand beside an intimacy he's not invited into, year on year. The prince and I made a beautiful private thing, and we never saw that its beauty had a shadow, and the shadow was a hollow man at my shoulder, and the hollow man let the dark in, and a green boy died for it. The language saved the prince. The language also, in a way I'll never be free of, made the traitor it then had to defeat. The weight of the half-second, what it is to decide a kingdom's course in less than a breath. I keep saying the half-second, and I want to honor what a half-second actually is, because people think the great decisions of their lives will come with time to make them, with deliberation, with a quiet room and a clear head, and the truth is the ones that matter most come in less than a breath, and you decide them with whatever you happen to be in that instant, and then you spend the rest of your life either grateful or ruined for what you happen to be. I had less than a breath. The finger pointed at Doran, and the prince's eyes came to my face, and the whole rest of everything. The prince's life, the kingdom's course, Pel's life though I didn't know it yet, my own future, all of it balanced on what I did in the time it takes a held breath to want to be let go. And there was no deliberating. There was no weighing of the options like a clerk with a ledger. There was only what I already was, built across 9 years, and what I already was a woman who trusted that man's hand over her own reflex. And so that's what I did, instantly, before thought, the decision made not in the half-second but in the 9 years that had shaped what I'd be when the half-second came. That's the secret nobody tells you about the great decisions. You don't make them in the moment. You make them in the years before, in who you let yourself become, and then the moment just collects what you've already built. The half-second didn't decide anything. The half-second revealed what 9 years had decided. I'd become, across 9 years, a person who'd trust the prince's hand against all reflex, and so when the half-second came, that person acted and the prince lived. If I'd become someone else across those 9 years, someone who trusted the team over the principal, the prince dies in that half-second and I never even know I'd failed. I'd have thought I was doing right, trusting my team, moving as one. The half-second is honest. It shows you exactly what you've made of yourself, with no time to pretend to be anything else. I found out in less than a breath that I'd made myself into someone who'd trust that one man past everything. It saved a king. It's the proudest and most frightening thing I know about myself, that the half-second found that in me and not something worse. The prince lived. He's king now. The old king died a few years on and Havard took the throne, and he's a good king, careful. A man who learned young exactly how thin the line is between the trusted and the turned, and rules accordingly with both more mercy and more watchfulness than most, because he knows. He knows from a gallery and a stare and a boy who died between him and the dark. We don't speak of it. We did once after, the only time he tried to thank me and I couldn't take it. The same as guards in other tales can't take the thanks, because the thanks was for the night and the night had Pell in it, and you can't be thanked for a night that killed a boy. He understood. He didn't thank me again. But he did a thing I keep. He found out about Pell's family, the boy's mother in some far town, and he saw to her quietly for the rest of her life. The king himself never named, just a sum that arrived and kept arriving, because the prince who lived never forgot the boy who didn't, and that more than any thanks told me who I'd spent 9 years guarding. A man who pays a dead boy's mother in secret for life is a man worth a half-second's trust over your own reflex. I'd read his hand right. I'd read the whole of him right across 9 years. That's the one thing I got wholly right. I read the prince true. I just never read the man at my other shoulder at all. I left the work after. Couldn't stay. A close protection lead who's learned she can build a language so perfect with one principle that she goes blind to the hollow man on her other side. That lead can't be trusted to lead again. Not because she's not skilled, but because she knows now what her own skill is blind to. And a guard who knows her own blind spot and stands a post anyway is a danger, because the blind spot doesn't close just from being known. So I left with honor, with the king's true gratitude, with a pension, with a boy's death and a traitor's hollow face, and a prince's saved life all carried out together. The way these things always come bundled, the saving and the cost in the same arms. I think about the half-second still. The half-second where the prince's finger pointed at Doran and I had to choose which 9 years to believe. I chose the language over the reflex, the hand over the team, and I was right. The prince lived because I was right. But I've understood slowly over the years that the half-second wasn't really the choice. The real choice was made over 9 years before that night ever came. The choice, made 1,000 small times, to build a beautiful private language with the prince and never once widen it to include the man at my other shoulder. That was the choice that mattered. The half-second just paid its bill. By the time the finger pointed at Doran, Doran had already been made into the thing it pointed at, made by 9 years of an almost I never noticed, and the half-second's brilliant reading of the hand was just me finally seeing, too late, the shape of a betrayal my own blindness had helped build. I read the hand true. I just never read the cost of the language that taught me to. That's the whole of it. A hidden signal at a gala and an emergency extraction, and a prince alive today on a throne, and underneath the clean record, a private language that saved a king and made a traitor, a green boy who bought a life with his own in 90 seconds, and a half-second that was really 9 years, and a lead who read one man perfectly for a decade, and the man beside him not at all. They'll tell you I saved the prince with a brilliant read of a hidden signal. I did. They won't tell you I helped build the thing I had to save him from. I'm telling you, because a record that only holds the saving and not the cost is a lie by tidiness, and the boy deserves better than a tidy lie, and so does the hollow man, and so, in the end, does the truth. The night after getting him out, the part the record makes clean. I skipped the actual getting out, the part after the gallery, because the gallery was the heart of it, but you should have the after, because it's where the shaking starts, where the body that did the terrible necessary things finally has to be a person again. We got down a different stair, the prince and I, his hand on my shoulder now, not signing anything, just holding just the human weight of a man who's seen a boy die for him, and out a side way into the cold, into the waiting cars. And here the record is true. The emergency extraction did happen. The cars, the speed, the safe house, all of it. The machine working the way it's supposed to once you get clear of the part that's broken. But the record makes it sound like the machine worked the whole time, clean and professional. And it didn't. The machine was the thing that broke. The machine had Doran in it. And what actually got the prince out was not the machine but two people and a private language and a green boy's body. And only after all that did the machine, the clean part of it, take over and do the easy end of the work and get all the credit in the record. I remember the prince's face in the car in the dark, the city lights going by. He'd held it together through all of it, the gala, the stair, the gallery, the iron control of a man who knows the worst thing he can do is fall apart while there's still danger. And in the car, safe, the danger past, he didn't fall apart either, but I watched him not fall apart, watched the cost of holding it sit on him, and I understood that he'd carry the gallery the rest of his life same as me, that Pell had died for him and he knew it, and a decent man never sets that down. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say that the language had words for. We'd built a tongue for galas and warnings and small mercies, and it had no signs for a boy dead in a gallery, no gesture for what we'd just been through together. So we sat in the dark in silence, the prince and I, fluent in a language that had finally reached the edge of what it could say, and the silence was its own last sign, the one we'd never made and didn't need to. I know. We both know. Pell. What the investigation found, the shape of the betrayal, since I owe you the whole. They took the thing apart after, the way they do, quiet inquiry, sealed, the kingdom not wanting it known how close it had come. And what they found was the shape I'd guessed in the gallery and worse in the details. Doran had been turned the better part of a year. A foreign faction, coin, the promise of a place. But the coin and the place were never really the thing, the inquiry found. The thing was the bitterness they'd found to pour the coin into, the 9 years of second chair, the almost. They'd approached him precisely because their watchers had marked him as the trusted man with the rot in him, the same rot I'd missed, which a stranger's cold eye caught in a season, and I missed in 9 years because I wasn't looking. They'd offered him the thing the almost ached for, to matter, to be the one who decided a kingdom's course, to stop being the right hand and be a hand in his own right, even a treasonous one. And he'd taken it slowly, the way these things go, one small compromise at a time until he was all the way in and there was no back. The second man, the one in the gallery, Doran had recruited himself, found his own almost man on the detail, because betrayal spreads along the same fault lines, the hollow find the hollow. 2 turned out of a detail of a dozen. It could have been worse, it was bad enough. And the inquiry, in its sealed, careful way, noted a thing that I've never been able to read as anything but an accusation, though it was written as a finding, that the closeness between the principal and the lead, while operationally valuable, had created an exclusion within the detail that may have contributed to the disaffection of the second. They wrote it cold, bureaucratic, may have contributed. I read it in my own blood. The thing the prince and I built that saved his life was also, in the inquiry's own dry words, a thing that helped make the traitor. I'd known it in the gallery before they ever wrote it. But to see it written, official, sealed, the language that saved the king helped build the betrayal it saved him from, that was the inquiry handing me in cold ink the exact weight I've carried since. They cleared me of fault. They commended me, even. And in the same document they wrote the sentence that's been my life's verdict. The closeness created an exclusion. I built a beautiful thing with one man and went blind to another, and the blindness cost a boy his life. And the cold inquiry saw it as clearly as I did and wrote it down, and then commended me anyway, which is its own particular cruelty, to be commended and convicted in the same sealed page. The other guards, the clean ones, who never knew what they stood beside. There's a thing I think about with the rest of the detail, the clean ones, the 10 who weren't turned. They were on the floor that night, around the edges of the gala, standing their posts, professional, loyal, good guards, and they never knew. Never knew that their lead was walking the prince out through a betrayal. Never knew that 2 of their own were turned. Never knew, most of them, until the sealed inquiry told the few it had to tell that the night had been anything but a routine early departure. They stood their posts and guarded a gala, and the realest thing that ever happened in their careers happened 12 feet from them, and they never saw it. Because I couldn't tell them. Because I didn't know which of them was clean and had no time to find out. And so I cut them all out, treated the whole detail as compromised, walked the prince out alone with one green boy rather than trust a single one of 10 good guards who'd have died for him. I think about what that cost them, those 10, though they never knew the cost. They were good and loyal, and I couldn't use them, because betrayal poisons trust indiscriminately. Once you know one of the team is turned, you can't trust any of them, not because they're guilty, but because you can't prove them innocent in the time you have. And so the turning of 2 men robbed 10 good men of the chance to be what they were, to do the thing they'd trained for, to guard their prince in his worst moment. The traitors didn't just betray the prince. They betrayed the 10 clean guards too, stole from them their own trustworthiness in my eyes, made me unable to use the very loyalty they'd spent careers building. That's the widest damage of betrayal from within, the thing that spreads furthest. It doesn't only turn the turned, it poisons the trust in everyone around them, makes the loyal useless by making them unprovable. 10 good guards stood ready that night, and I couldn't reach for a single one, and they never even knew they'd been made unreachable, and that's a quiet cost on top of all the loud ones. The 10 good men robbed of their moment by 2 hollow ones, and none of them ever knowing it happened. I knew. I always know. It's my curse and my work. I knew I was cutting out 10 good men, and I did it anyway because I had to, and they went home that night thinking it had been a quiet gala, never knowing their lead had been forced to treat their loyalty as worthless. I'm sorry for that, even now. They deserved better than to be made unreachable by other men's rot. Everyone in this story deserved better than what the rot made of us. That's what rot does. It makes everyone less than they were, even the ones who stayed true. The language retired the last sign, and why I left. The prince, the king now, and I never used the language again after that night. I want to end near there because it's the truest small thing, and the small true things are where these stories actually live. We had 100 signs, 200, 9 years of private speech, and after the gala we never used one of them again. Not because we'd forgotten. You don't forget a language you bled to build, but because every sign had Doran in it now. Every gesture was made of the same closeness that the inquiry said had built the traitor, and neither of us could lift a hand into one of the old shapes without the gallery rising up behind it. The language had been our tenderness and our safety, and it had become, in one night, the thing that helped kill a boy, and you can't keep speaking a tongue that's turned to ash in your mouth. So we let it die. The most fluent 2 speakers of a language the world had ever held, and we sealed our lips on it forever, and it died with us still alive to mourn it, which is the saddest way a language can die, not forgotten but abandoned, set down on purpose because it had learned to say a thing too terrible to keep speaking. That's why I left the work in the end, more than the blind spot, more than the fear of leading blind again. I left because the language was dead, and the language had been the best of me, the closest bond I'd had, the one thing I was truly the only person in the world able to do, read that man's hand. And once we'd retired it, I was just another skilled guard, and a skilled guard who's lost her language and gained a blind spot, and a dead boy is a guard who should go home. So I went home. The king sees to Pel's mother in secret and sees to me in his way, a quiet pension and a quieter respect, and we meet rarely, and when we do we don't sign, we just look. 2 people who once spoke a tongue no one else knew and chose to go silent in it forever. The looking is the last sign. It's the only one we have left. It says everything the old 100 said and one thing more, the thing the gallery taught us. I know what we built and what it cost, and I'd build it again, and I'd give anything not to have had to. And there's no sign for that, there was never a sign for that. We just look, and the looking holds it, the way silence holds the things no language ever found the gesture for. That's the whole of it, a hidden signal at a gala, an emergency extraction. A king alive on his throne, a boy dead in a gallery, a traitor I helped make without knowing, and a language retired forever because it had learned to say the unbearable. The record keeps the signal and the extraction, and the king's living. I keep the rest. I've set it down now, so the rest exists somewhere too. The boy, the hollow man, the cost, the dead language, because the record's tidy version is a lie by tidiness, and the true version has a 19-year-old in it who deserved to be more than a clean line, and a hollow man who deserved to be seen before it was too late, and a bond so beautiful it went blind. That's the true version. Now you have it. Now someone besides me carries it. Thank you for that. It's heavy, and I've carried it alone a long time, and it's lighter shared, even with a stranger, even just by being read. Sira Vane, once lead of the prince's close protection, kingdom of Aldermere. I read his hand true for 9 years and never read the man beside me once. The king lives. Pell doesn't. The language is dead, and I do all of it again and pray I never had to, and there's no sign for that either, so I'll just stop here in the silence where the truest things always end.